chats I've had, it's going to be a very interesting chat.
So apparently for the panelists, all three of you, Sujit unofficially told that this has been the best panel, who were very much fired up before the session, with all the questions and interactions. So the bar is set very high. Even before
so I hope now, you're giving us a lot of pressure now.
So, yeah.
I'm sure he does it with every panel, so that he gets the best out of every panel.
No.
Everyone happy then. And by the way, we are live now also, no?
Yeah.
Between Sujit and Nishan, they should be able to cover 1 hour easily.
Only try topics. That is only
No comments.
So I think we are good to go.
Nishan,
Yeah. Lebara, when you're ready.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome you all to the Opinion Unlock series brought to you by the Informatics Institute of Technology, Sri Lanka, in collaboration with Articulate Asia. The running theme across episodes will be all about cybersecurity. And we have some noteworthy names lined up for the discussion today, including corporate leaders and change makers. The discussion for the day is themed as cybersecurity, the essential ingredient for digital transformation. Joining with us today are some eminent personalities who needs no introduction. Chiranti Kure, Chief Transformation Officer at Hatton National Bank PLC, Umesh De Fonseca, Chief Technology Officer at AIA Sri Lanka, Nishan Devadasan, Vice President and Head of Technology Operations at John Keells Holdings PLC. And of course, our moderator for the series, Sujit Christie, Director at Layer 7 Seguro Consultoria. We're also joined by 500 plus participants on LinkedIn and our audience from FB Live as well. We have all these gents and lady here with us for the whole next hour, and we encourage you to share all your questions on the chat box below. Over to you, Mr. Sujit Christie.
Thank you, Olivera. I take this opportunity to thank everyone who has made time to join us. I think now this has become more of a global event than restricted to Sri Lanka. So that's with that note, I would like to quickly get started. Right? So digital transformation has been underway for many years now, right? But the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic made it an overnight business necessity. So as organizations were forced to move their operations and workforce online, it became increasingly clear that the key to surviving and emerging stronger out of crisis is to go digital. Soon, the digitize or die realization gave birth to a new momentum that powered digital innovation. Right? So as digital transformation became an imperative, most companies, the processes was intense and sometimes very agonizing, as core drivers of digital transformation were competitive threats and new business opportunities. So today with me on the panel, we have these experts who are going to share their experience, right? So I'm going to turn to Chiranti. I have got some statistics here, right? Companies which have not native, right, digitally native, have a phenomenal challenge as to how to transform it to being digitally driven. There are several studies, and one specific study I picked up was from IMD's Global Center for Digital Business Transformation, which says approximately 70% of digital transformations fail. That's a bit scary number. 87% of the transformations fail to meet expectations. That's again a failure, nothing positive about it, right? This is not it. When you look at an organization's hierarchy and when you go further down the hierarchy, to the bottom layer, there are few frictions, right? One of them they talk about because of a weak leadership, and there is no sense of ownership, sometimes short-term pressures, and sometimes misaligned initiatives. They also contribute to misalignment. Then, of course, the team dynamics. There is this one particular person, maybe they call them the hippo effect, meaning the highest paid person's opinion survives in every single situation. Right? So in your opinion, in your experience, how do you think organizations should approach the people factor with respect to cybersecurity in a digital transformation journey? Shanti?
Right. Thank you and good evening, everyone. It's a really great pleasure to be with all of you today, this evening. Thank you, Sujit, for your question. So without much ado, I will try to explain it to you from a very, very popular and very famous, framework. So it's called the 7S model. Actually, digital transformation, the cybersecurity should be embedded into the strategy of the entire journey if you're going digital. Today, whether it's digital, and let me tell you this, so today, whether it's digital or cybersecurity or even sustainability, anything is not a buzzword that is going to come and then we hope, okay, now at some point this will go. These are integrating into the core business model. So first of all, the first step is to make it a part of your strategy. And once that's done, you need to build the right structure around it. For example, if you're building a function of cybersecurity in your transformation journey, you have to place it at the right place in the structure. Otherwise, putting people there in the wrong place just to tick a box, like those days 30 years ago, when HR didn't so much exist, but personnel did, suddenly HR became a buzzword and people hired a HR manager from somewhere and ticked a box. So are we going to just put a function, a table, and a person, a CISO, and say, okay, now everything is fine. We are looking at digital and then a CDO. So the structure, the correct structure. Then the third one is always the skills. The right skills have to be brought in. The proper systems have to be invested in. And we need to take this whole strategy then to the people and make it a part of the style or the culture, and we make it a shared value. That is the only way. There's absolutely no other way, because all the touch points in whether it's an employee journey or a customer journey gets covered if you start from the strategy and end up owning it as everybody as a shared value. So that's my view in terms of how you should bring about the change in digital transformation, and especially featuring cybersecurity.
So Shranti, I mean, the point you emphasized is about shared value. It is no longer a choice. It is a mandate, right? So that we have the right people in the right places to transform an organization, not only digitally, to be data-driven as well, right? I mean, that's what I gather from your view, right? So moving on, Nishan, right? So people are an essential part, right? But if you look at the global headlines, several times we see that discussions are all centered around technologies, right? The moment you talk about digital transformation, people talk about cloud. People talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning. And when it comes to cybersecurity, they will start talking about all these services being provisioned in the cloud. But you will also agree with me, the amount of cyber fraud or identity related security incidents also have been increasing significantly over the last 12 months. So the question is, it is becoming a very serious problem, right? Now, if you wear a banker's lens, or when you look at it from a banking fraud, it is an issue where it involves money because identity becomes an issue. So how do we, as organizations, build that trust in the digital transformation journey? So from a people perspective is what I'm looking at. If you can respond to that, Nishan, it'll be great.
Sure. So I think with this whole COVID, I was just talking to another friend of mine sometime back, and we said, if you remember the 2000 bug that came, that was actually one of the digital transformations happened at that time when people couldn't, they were worried that they couldn't access their computers. That's it. That was their biggest worry. They couldn't access Excel. Today, the next massive transformation happened when we were used to brick and mortar, and we had to transfer into the cloud, which is now dealing at it's practically at nanoseconds or whatever seconds we're calling it, at very high speeds. And thereby the attacks became very, relentless. They just continued bombarding the whole process. I was looking at some statistics, nearly 500 million applications today within the next 5 years are going to hit the markets. Over 40 years, what was not happening in 40 years is going to get hit in just the next 5 years, 500 million applications. Now imagine all these applications is there for a demand. And who is creating the demand? All of us. We are the people who are going to come in there. And identity is going to be that key factor that is going to glue us to these applications. Right? So if you look at the attacks that are coming to play, so who are they going to steal? So tomorrow you'll give your identity out, you will log into something, and then you're hoping that you're going to get a service. So when the COVID happened itself, right? The supermarkets that got involved in on-premise motor-driven connections, they didn't understand that when you went to the cloud, the systems will be up, right? We earlier call it BCP, now we call it, say, the word resilience. But I think we are going beyond all these BCP and resilience. If I can't get food to the table, right? No one cares about BCP or resilience. You have to build systems that are going to be everlasting. The connecting, the logistics, right? And in the cloud, you are limited because there are logistics happening in the local, the touch points that you have in the market. So identity will become key, much stronger, and thereby, in my terms, I would say it is designed. Security and privacy has to be designed in and built into whatever we do, in whatever we think, in every single process. So that's what I would suggest, that we need to look at identity very seriously, especially identities that have internal and external in play for any business.
Nishan, you spoke of a couple of things, right? So today, when I look at, from what I gathered from what you just said, is there are several identities. When you look at a organization's ecosystem, you have employees and you have external partners. It can be customers, it can be a partner, a vendor, right? So that's what you're trying to say in terms of identity. And then you're also saying that you need to know who they are. So in that context, when you look at these identities, you need to look at as to how you're going to grant access to that millions of applications which are going to be there, right? So how do we create that trust, right? So that's what you're saying. So the point what you're trying to say is that we need to build trust right from the time we design systems, security by design, privacy by design, so that the identity can be established. So I'm just going to move on the same thought to Umeshi. There's a lot of news about, the latest one which I was reading was Saudi Aramco, right? And I think Aramco has been in the news for several days in the last few weeks. And the threat actor claims that they have a lot of information. I'll just list down a few of those things which they're claiming to have, right? They have about 14,000 plus employee details. They're also saying they've got specifications relating to systems, including electrical and power, architectural, engineering, construction, environmental, machinery, vessel, etc. They're also talking about information about network layouts, IP addresses, SCADA systems, Wi-Fi access points, IP cameras. That also is a long list. They're also saying they got precise coordinates of locations. But in this whole process, Saudi Aramco is saying that they were not breached, as in it was not a ransomware attack, but it is somebody who is trying to say that this is an extortion campaign. But somewhere else, they're also saying that this information has been taken from one of their partners or suppliers. So when you look at the supply ecosystem, now all of us on this call, right? I mean, take HND or John Keels or any other organization, right? We are dependent on an ecosystem. On one side, we are dependent on our partners, such as the vendors. The other side, we are also got to service our customers. So in order to build that trust, which Nishan is talking about, right, the identity and extending it from, so when you grant access to a vendor to service your infrastructure, what goes through your mind? How do you look at the supplier security?
Very timely question, Sujit. I think all of us with this pandemic, situation, we realized that some of these activities throughout our entire corporate value chain, there are instances, obviously, that we, outsource to reliable partners certain activities. This ranges from things like payroll processing to call centers to, various other functions. But not all of us actually goes into detail to see how, now let's say that example, if you take AIA or John Keels or HNB, we obviously invest a lot in terms of securing our, threat landscape and making sure that our office environments are safe from cyber threats as much as possible. But not all of us may be going into detail to see if we outsource part of, our particular function to a third party. What is the security that that third party has in place to, securely process our data and information? That's extremely important, because no matter, similar to what you mentioned with Aramco or even Boeing for that matter, they also outsource certain parts of, their process. So even though you invest millions of dollars securing your perimeter, if the third party doesn't have even some of the basic things, you'd be surprised. Some of the outsourcing partners in Sri Lanka doesn't even have a proper patch regime in place, right? And they use end-of-life software. A lot of loopholes you'll find because they are not IT experts, and they are process experts. So their focus is get whatever you can with the cheapest possible cost, and you build the customer, that is us, right? So I think it shouldn't be an afterthought, but rather when you're onboarding a third-party supplier or an external vendor, it has to be part of the procurement process to validate whether the third party that we are looking at has the sufficient information security practices, policies, and the tools in place to make sure that they can handle our data in a secure manner. Otherwise, it'll all be in vain. And while trying to save costs, we would have ended up, handing our data on a platter to someone who can exploit the third party. So it's very important, I believe, and we should have a proper framework. And then, one of the evaluation criteria when you are outsourcing a particular process to a third party, this cybersecurity awareness and the processes and the equipment in place should also be validated, in my view, Sujit.
Umesh, I'm going to stay with you, right? I'm just going to ask a few more questions on the supplier security.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to focus more on the people side of it. Now, a lot of emphasis, right? I mean, you did talk about patch as an example, right? Outdated platforms and various other things. But I mean, starting from Shiranti's opening remark, right? People are becoming a critical factor in all this. Right? Typically, when we look at frameworks, we also talk about people, process, technology. And the people part of it, and sometimes is not given the level of importance you need to give. Now, one of the things which I keep battling when I talk to different clients or different people, trust is a big question, right? I mean, that's something, it's like a glass, right? So you drop it, it breaks, and that's something you can't put it together. Now, we can have multiple suppliers, different brands, big brands, small brands, whatever it is. People become the glue to this whole process. What do you think in your mind should be the process to ensure that we get the right people to do the right thing to ensure the highest level of security from a supplier's perspective? So if you can just, share some thoughts on that.
Sure. So, I mean, throughout my entire career, what I've noticed is, like you mentioned, sometimes we overlook the whole people aspect of things, right? So similarly, when you're outsourcing a process to a third-party supplier, the discussions generally happen at high level, right? You speak to that procurement person on that side, and you wouldn't obviously, or at least in certain cases, you wouldn't go down to the level to see, ground level to see what that supplier's staff are up to. What is their awareness levels? Are they trained well to handle confidential information? Are they aware of the nature of the data that they are going to handle and process? These are key things which can be fixed easily, I believe, with a little bit of training and awareness and monitoring. So my view is, Sujit, as I mentioned earlier, we should have a third-party security assessment framework in place. And one of the items in that checklist should be to check the awareness of cybersecurity with regard to the third-party suppliers, staff and people. A simple example would be, I'm sure you'll agree with me, nowadays, one of the most common cyber threats would be a phishing attack, which we've seen happening right across in many other organizations. If you look at an average or average Sri Lankan company, not everyone might know what a phishing attack is, right? Obviously, three of us, if you take HNB, AIA, and John Keys, we will know what a phishing attack is because people like you obviously tell us what it is, right? But you go down to ground level, outside of Colombo, people who actually work in other smaller companies, I don't think they will know the seriousness of what a phishing attack can do to organization and its data. One click can change everything, right? So because of that, I believe that awareness throughout at all levels of the third-party suppliers, chain should be done very often. And you should also train them on why this is important and the repercussions of us, the organization not following those guidelines. Because it's simply because they might not be aware, right? So I feel that would be the right approach when you're handling third-party supplier staff, as well as you might have other, threat assessment tools in place like BitSite, which we are using. That will sort of give you an idea of whether that supplier is actually following the guidelines that you've given, or it is coming to a compromising situation. So I think it's very important that you continuously monitor, even after you engage a third-party supplier, you continuously monitor to see whether the KPI is not only related to performance, but the KPIs that you set out in terms of cybersecurity and data management is actually adhered to by the supplier throughout this entire contractual period.
Yes, Sureshi, right? So people aspect, phishing is one area you spoke of. I would also like to highlight something else. I think sometimes we tend to overlook this aspect, right? I mean, it's done as a checklist in several places. Now, I overheard, one of the leading CIOs in Sri Lanka, he made in one of the meetings very recently, a few hours, I would say not even 48 hours from this comment was made, is trust becoming an issue, especially with our partners, right? So in that context, we are also trying to see whether there is a trend, or like today, the threat actors, they know it's very difficult to breach a perimeter if they have to do a brute force and get in, because we have the alarms, we have people monitoring and all those things. So people are the weakest link. Right? So can our people fall victim to any of those things, right? So one of the things, in addition to the phishing, is can they be offered a goodie, right? Or something in return for something else. So that's becoming a concern, right? And I know, like, working with some of the global organizations, one of the things which they are actively looking at is in terms of the background verification. Right? And I was speaking to a friend of mine who is based out of Canada, and she was saying, even before the offer letter is sent to her, they've already started doing the background check. Like they clearly said, give me the name of, as in your passport, give me your passport numbers, give me the history where you have lived. So in some cases, right, and I worked with a company in Hyderabad, and they have a routine to go through every day. Their customers, right, and some of your competition, right? So they with some of your competition in the insurance field. And in the morning, they're given a list. These are the 5 people we want you to go and get them to do a substance test. Right now, if let's say if this particular guy has gone for a party overnight, he's done. Right?
Of course.
Right? So the substance use is also becoming an issue. Now, I think I remember reading in SC magazine somewhere early 2000, 2003, there was this guy who was actually in the bar having a drink, and they were trying to, tell him, I'll get you a drink or get you something. Tell me your password, right? And this guy goes on to say, my company policy says I shall not share the password. Right? But then people also find different ways to entice people. Right? So I'm just going to switch over to Shiranti. Right? I'm just changing a few things. Right? I'm just trying to connect to what Meshi mentioned in terms of people. Right? People are not machines. Machines, you can configure a rule and say, hey guys, this is what the rule should be, and you implement it. If there is an anomaly, you will have an alert which will get triggered. Now, for every digital transformation initiative, you need the right people. That's what you mentioned, right? How do you manage change? How do you manage the culture? Because today, people, we bring in people, right? We do cloud sourcing, or sometimes you have a new project, you need expertise, and you may not find those expertise within your organization. You're dependent on a third party, or an external resource, or an external expert. They come with different value systems, right? They have different experiences. They have different expectations. What is your experience, Shiranti, in terms of managing change and ensuring that people are within that culture of addressing that issue?
Yes, Sujit. So you started with trust and moved on to culture. The precursor to the question was about the trust. I think you can't be mistrusting people or blindly trusting people. In the question of trust, what is really important is to build in systemic safeguards, whether it's contracts or whether it's declarations, whether it's computer level, user level, device level, system architecture level. Systemic safeguards is one way you support the trust culture. That makes the trust and the trust culture sustainable. Then, in terms of the empathy and the more humanistic safeguards. So if I'm leading a team, I should be able to connect to every member of the team. If someone is looking a little jaded, so it's like a nice cascading flow where from the top to the bottom, from tooth to tail, everyone is focusing on a cell, a working group, a unit, so that nobody gets left behind or gets compromised or falls prey. I mean, from a banking point of view, if we are giving a loan to someone, we look at their debt servicing capacity, their credit worthiness. Now, beyond the ability to pay, which is the mathematical part of it, there is also more conduct and behavioral part of it, the lifestyle patterns of the person, their consumer behaviors and spend. So same way we need to bring in those as well. In terms of then the right culture, what binds the culture is a set of shared values. When you, I earlier in the afternoon, I was talking to about 150 of our senior managers. That was about the power of three. It's about the HNB brand and some of the brand principles. So, when you wear your brand on your, right left side of your chest in a logo like this, right? From college to now, we were trained. You hold that mantle of responsibility. So bringing in a whole shared values around becomes the bedrock of the culture, and get people to embody and live by those. So when I was in non-banking financial services many years ago, I still remember Global Financial Services Organization, Zurich Financial Services Group. Their code of conduct, the core values came in an acronym called ABIDE. Accept risk with responsibility, being ethical, innovation, dedication to customers, and excellence in everything you do. Now, this is 17, 18 years ago, and I still remember to say it like this. So what did we do? When you get it from your group head office in Switzerland, and they use it in the Americas and Africas, we took it and we converted it into Sinhala and Tamil, and the Sinhala translation went as Pili Padimu, abide, Pili Padimu. So that is how you build culture. You make it known and felt and make it a living part of everyone in the organization. Culture is not just the sole mandate of the CEO or the chief culture officer or the HR. It just doesn't happen that way. It becomes a shared ownership, like something very precious, that it's like family. Everyone carries that legacy. So that's how you bring in and tie everyone around the culture. And I think I addressed the trust part of it a little earlier. So that's how I would like to answer you.
Jonathan, I'm going to stay with you on the same topic, right? So you mentioned about being, abide to the guidelines or abide to the ethical values, right? So this is in addition to being, empathy and that you collaborate and all those things. So we are talking about abiding to the code of conduct and also to drive excellence. So typically we talk about all these things when it comes to our leadership teams as well as our teams which are within our premises or who is working within the organization, right? I just want to cut across to our ecosystem, right? When I'm talking about the ecosystem, I'm talking about our partners, our vendors. They said, in one of the surveys, right? Ponimon's Institute survey, they found that 63% of the respondents said they rely on the reputation of the partners and suppliers than evaluating their practices. How do you see? Do you see the same behavior in the subcontinent? Or is there something which we need to do to, enhance that? You were referring to your Swiss experience as well. Can you just share some thoughts on that, Shiranti?
So I think when you talk of your suppliers, your supply chain, the other people who connect with you to business, predominantly, I think historically, the whole strategy has been driven on price and cost. Now, a lot of organizations, possibly the MNC started first and everyone else followed. And I would like to bring in a case in point, Unilever's COBP, Code of Best Practice. It extended to the supplier and beyond. So whether it was in terms of ethical sourcing, whether it was to accepting gifts and gratis, things like that. So these are the global organizations made that shift. However, our part of the world, price and cost was always a challenge, and we were a little later to adopt it. But I think today Sri Lanka, in the subcontinent, especially if you look at Sri Lanka, I think people are conscious. There's a growing sense of informed awareness around these things. So from cost and price, they're also looking at value and ethics. They would not want to associate with the wrong kind of party just to get the job done. About a month ago, I was part of a not-for-profit organization which launched a survey among women entrepreneurs. They were more SME, and I was asked in to come in, to give some inputs to the survey findings and some perspectives. And I was very pleased to find those women entrepreneurs, it was a large survey, found it very difficult actually to approach a big company. And since 3 big companies are in the program, I will say our kind of companies, that was one. And they also were scared to get into the tech field. However, when they were asked about ethics in business, about doing the right thing, they chose that over other priorities. So I'm not saying this is a women or men thing. In a simple SME survey, within a entirely different demography, which was also not just urban, but somewhat suburban and rural as well, they placed value in it. So, I mean, this is for me to answer your question, one of the best examples personally, which I was aware, and I was actually surprised. So, so there is some informed awareness, but that informed awareness to translate into a structured program, drive it, bring action to it, then build a best practice around it, I think we have a long way to go.
I think what's encouraging, Shiranti, to hear is that we have made a start. It's not like, oh, is it something we need to think about or do something about it, right? So there is awareness, and that's very encouraging. So moving on, Nishan, I'm coming to you. Pandemic was a welcome thing, right? I mean, for me personally, I would say, not from the health perspective, right? From a digital transformation perspective, I think it actually enabled a lot of things, right? It accelerated adoption, right? Otherwise, we were talking about cloud adoption, various other things in a much more spaced out manner. And some of them were not even getting the right attention what we had to. Now, looking at the group, right? The John Keys group, or even some of the customers use service, not just in Sri Lanka, but also in the other markets. So you're privy to, look at, how customers have been looking at the digital transformation. Right? Now, one of the things I think we've had this discussion several times in the past, and the discussion is about business continuity plan. And I think a lot of people say now, even when the auditors come, the first thing they ask is, do you have a business continuity plan? And then what people usually do, they do 2 things. One, either they go look for the document, dust it, and present it to the auditor, or they say, yes, we have one. So the auditor will say, okay, when was the last time you did the disaster recovery drill? So you would actually show some results. Or let's say if you're actually doing a drill, you would find all the people out there doing everything from their head, right? They don't need any documentation, right? I think they would have probably read for an exam several times over, but when it comes to business continuity or disaster recovery drill, they don't need any documentation. Umeshi, do you agree? Right? Yeah. That's what we see, right? I'm sure people here on this call would also agree with me. But Nishan, the question I want to ask you is BCP relevant when you are actually got all your staff scattered around the world? Today, earlier we had just one office, right? You said primary location, secondary location. Today you have critical users sitting in several parts of the country or even outside of Sri Lanka. So what is your take in terms of business continuity, recovery, time objectives. There's so many jargons which we use. Is it still relevant? What's your take?
Oh, that's a lot of questions, but I think COVID tested all our metals, right? It started off with the people. I personally felt a lot of people got involved and they did what they did. And technology was always there, but with the cloud journey, cloud coming to play, BCP concept practically died, because you're now talking 24/7 operations, you're talking connectivity across any time, any place. And we have got used to RPO, RTO. When we say BCP, we immediately go and say RPO and RTO. Some will say, I have a backup. Like you said, some have documentation. And then some say what to do. Actually, the best thing that happened to JKH during this time, when the first hit happened, I said we will do a BCP for the group. And we will try our core systems. We will do a failover between two sites. So everyone said, what is going to happen? You can't get out. You cannot. This is crazy. I said, let's do it. Right. And we had a short break, I think. And when there was a curfew came into play. And so we were preparing for that 1 hour, thought, okay, emergency, we will go get the approvals and see. Right. And we thought it was another normal BCP plan. You can, get your tea guys ready, deliver food. People will go pick up buses, and because we didn't understand the concept of it's a good day, right? So it's a click on a button and something will go. So the people aspect didn't get realized. But when this BCP, we did a first complete BCP for the John Keys group. So 70 companies, we literally shut down a data center, brought it up on the secondary side. We did the test with the businesses and brought it back. That was so encouraging, that the journey and the time we spent, right? And I think there was a lot of we didn't compromise. I mean, yeah, we are known as sometimes hard negotiators and stuff like that, but the partners supported us, right? And we realized that we didn't actually bleed out the partner by negotiating too much, and they can't deliver it also. Because sometimes to get a deal, partners will give anything and start talking because there is no time. But partners supported us, the principles came into play, and everyone got a lot of learning out of it. Right, so BCP happened, but then the new learning that I realize is resilience, right? And now we are going beyond resilience, because the cloud, earlier we talk about 95% uptime or 99, and then we'll have to spend a lot of money to keep the 99.9, and the banks can afford it, but conglomerates or companies just can afford and talk that. But reality is, it is going to impact all of us, because our employees have to also get into that mode. So thereby the cloud came into play for us, and we took these journeys inside and internally. At about 3 or 4 years back, we were moving a lot of things out of us. We crowdsource things to make sure that, and I think that tested us out. The COVID actually proved that the decisions that we made during that journey paid well. And we were able to actually, we had a situation that we were not bothered about some of our websites, right? And within actually 2 days, and we had outsourced that application to some party. We were not bothered about too much about that, whether it's privacy and all that stuff. But it took us 2 days actually to rehash, talk to the partner, rehash the applications, lift, shift. And when we brought that site up onto the cloud, it was within 1 second, we had more than 1,000 attacks on that. We couldn't differentiate between the actual people coming in who needed the service and between the attackers who are coming on board, right? So the flexibility, earlier we will have to go and do a procurement. We'll have to call about 5-6 people trying to get, okay, what can we do? And we can't move. None of us, all of us are stuck inside our houses or, in a location. We can say we'll have to go and go to the police to get a report itself. You need to get onto the roads and write a document, right? You can't do it at the speed. By the time your attack vector is gone, so left, right, north, south bound, you don't know what has happened to you by the time you come on, because the cloud has given that power to the whole thing. So it's not about uptimes any further now. It's about continuously being up and servicing. And so thereby it's going to bring a massive toll on the people who are going to come into play. And it's changing the whole progress, right? People are going to get a lot of things out of this, but it's going to impact them severely. So in a sense that we learn that the resilience part of it is now RP and RTA is not going to be a question, because now business can't go down. Today, data center 1, data center 2, we may have a backup somewhere and all that we spoke. Today, if COVID, I mean, we thought Sri Lanka will get a flood if somebody throws a, some attack happens. It's an island where you're going to run. Now we have actually run. We have gone out. We are now Sri Lanka is a global player. We are not going to change that. And it's good to see that we are able to step up. I think we sometimes underassume that Sri Lankans couldn't play with the Amazons or the the big boys out there, right? In any form, but we are, and we have taken that to greater heights. So coming back into the resilience side of it, we need to now focus resilience on the people, because systems are there. I think a lot of the nuances, I was just thinking of the Terminator movie. If you saw the first part of the Terminator was they were trying to identify whether the guy was a bad guy or a good guy, right? The second version came into is they started a little bit of trusting, but the machine had to prove a lot of things to prove that it was good enough to protect man. And if you see the final version of Terminator, the machine actually was the savior. They had to make an artificial machine that came into play. So today, I don't know, in the right sense of the word, we are getting there. But we have to keep in mind that the entire thing is now not moving into machines and the cloud or whatever we will want to call it. But we need to be careful of how people are going to be, and that's why we will have to continuously. In a term for me is that do we go as always verify, never trust, or never trust, always verify. Right? Whether it's anyone, whether it's internal, partner, vendor, they're all the same. Everyone stepped up to the plate and everything worked together because we work. But I think we will have to, in my view is I always take is I never trust, but always will verify and continuously verify. Now it is not verifying that the day you bring a police report, every time you log in to the system, it is every second, it needs to be verified, because at the end of the day, someone can take someone's identity. And if you have ordered something and you don't get that order to your house, how sad you're going to be, right? And it become all our responsibilities to ensure, customer, partner, family, all these portfolios or these personas we put into play. It is important that we all have to get together and make sure that the best of service is given to the people who are depending on it in the future as we move on.
Nishan, there were a lot of things you spoke about, right? So what I actually gathered, and I'm just going to rephrase some of those things which you said, is when you're talking about resilience, today you can't afford to be down because the customers expect you to be there 24/7. Rain or shine, service has to be delivered. So I think it has come to a point, not just for you, but for everyone globally, to ensure that they are able to provide the service every single mile, right? Not just digitally, but also physically. So everything has to be very well thought through. They need to be very clear in terms of where they need to depend on the platforms, technology, and where do they need to actually depend on the physical form, the humans, right? The second thing which I also want to add to what you just said is security by design, privacy by design, right? So today, if you take most of the global cloud providers, they provide you a certain SLA in terms of uptime. Are we building applications in line with that? When I say, let's say if some partner is providing us 99.99% uptime for the platform, our application availability should be 99.999, not lower. Because if the application fails, your cloud is still available, right? Your platforms are still available. So you have failed there. So it is in that context that you are saying the relevance of RTO, the RPO, the backup is not going to be so significant because we got to build resilience, like the human body, right? Like the kidneys, like your lungs. right? It needs to work irrespective of what ailment you have, those organs will have to function. So I'm just going to quickly switch back to Umeshi. We have about 9 minutes. So I'm just going to quickly come back to all of you again with a couple more questions. So Umesh, very quickly to touch on something which Nishan mentioned, right? Nishan mentioned about resilience. What is the role we expect the third parties to play in a typical resilience program? Is it something the organization can just do it by themselves, or is there a role for the third parties to do as well? Umeshi, your thoughts?
Yeah. So, Sujit, like I mentioned, when you are identifying a third party to handle part of your business, you need to make sure, other than the third party security assessment that you do for that particular vendor, that they can sort of move at the same pace and have the same practices. Like they have to tick with you, right? Otherwise, it becomes a challenge. But of course, I mean,
It's like the clockwork.
Exactly, right? So, of course, lockdown, actually brought in challenges which were beyond the control of some other vendor. For example, if you look at, you take a function like a courier, right? Job would be to bring documents from branches outside of Colombo, within a agreed SLA. So when there's a curfew in place, what can the courier do, right? So that is where the company's BCP kicks in, and we should have the relevant processes and practices in place within that BCP. Even when the third party is unable to deliver a particular service, the business should be resilient enough to move forward without any interruptions. So there were some practical challenges, that certain organizations would have faced even while having a resilient BCP in place. But obviously, if you properly do BCP drills the way it's intended to be done and actually go through the entire process, then I don't think there'll be much challenges, Sujit. Because I can say for AIA, obviously we do regular BCP drills and DR drills. We just completed a DR drill over the weekend, took almost 19 hours. But then, there are lessons learned and we improve. If these practices are in place and you actually make it a point to do it, not as an afterthought, but like you mentioned earlier, you have this big document and you just tuck it away somewhere. Unless if you actually do the proper process, I don't think you'll have much challenges.
Meshi, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you is that, like how the clock works, everybody, internal, external, they got to tick together. Okay. Right. So your external partners, they need to understand your policies. So they need to ensure that they adhere to it. They follow it meticulously, not dilute, right? And also understand your business continuity requirements. Right. So with that note, I'm just quickly going to shift to Shiranti. Shiranti, I'm just going to ask you a question. Like when we talk about policies, right? I mean, I write a lot of policies, and these two gentlemen out here on the call and others who have joined virtually with us, they also know most of my policies would say, don't do this, don't do that. And I think with age, with the color of my hair now, and I've realized that, you can't say something to the kids as well, right? When you tell the kid don't do something, and that's exactly they end up doing it.
That's what always happens with me.
Exactly, and right, and it is natural for a human being, and I've begun to realize, and of recent times, and I acknowledge, right, that the humans cannot take a negative thought as an action item. Right, you got to convey a message in a positive way. Right? Now, I mean, I have my son who keeps running around the house, and I have to tell him don't run. I can't tell him don't run because he'll still run. So how do I ensure that I make him do what I want him to do? It's the same thing with the cybersecurity, right? And we are talking not just one or two users. We are talking about different levels of users. You have the C level, the board members, and then you have the executives. then you have people who are non-tech people, right? How do you actually convey a message which they will adhere to and ensure the policies are complied? Shanti?
Right. So, Sujit, to make an answer very quickly, first of all, we have to make it relatable to them. What's in it for me? How is this going to solve a pain point for me? So starting from when you position cybersecurity, information and data security as a very high responsibility, especially in a financial services sense, if you don't do this, the consequences can be very grim. You can even lose your job. That's the reality. So first of all, so the pain point of probably being out of a job is actually a point to start with, but unnecessary hassle day to day, getting through the work easily. So, and then explain to people, so how this is this going to improve your work experience, build your career forward, then regress it backward, then provide training, create awareness, provide training, not just training in the classroom. I think with COVID also, we can't have a lot of classroom-based training. A lot of training has shifted to online. That's what we do as well. So a lot of communications, internal communications is a very powerful medium, very bite-sized, very bullets of information, flyers, releases, little, animated videos, sort of interactive, games like Menti or something, sudden spot polls. These are also ways to create that awareness and impart the learning and knowledge for people. So yes, there are certifications. If you take the bank, we have level 1 and level 2 information, data security, cyber security certifications. And some of those are mandatory. But then it's a real pain, right? I mean, I'm expected to do this. Otherwise, I'm not eligible for my next promotion or whatever. So that is one part of it, the not so great, not so looked forward to part of it. But if you help convert that mandatory certification into something that is going to safeguard your career, your livelihood, make you a more informed person, helps you make better decisions, raise your level of preparedness. So something I actually do in our internal interview panels, I ask questions. What do you understand by phishing attack? What is social engineering? These are from clerical to junior executive level promotions. Like we recently completed about 250 interviews. Those two and a couple of other, like, data classification. Do you remember what the classification labels are? Simple things, right? What is the OTP? What is endpoint security? What do you understand? Very simple things, but to see whether the classroom training has also reached people. And when they do respond, I actually really feel that the training given at the center has cascaded down in some way. So training is really important, and showing that training is not because the company wants, but it has a lot of other benefits for you, makes it more, the learner more motivated to learn.
Absolutely, Shanti. Right. I mean, we're just going to get running out of time. So I just want to quickly summarize what Shanti said, right? I mean, I think one of the takeaways from what I heard from you just now is promotions are not just issuing a letter. I think there has to be a conversation in terms of understanding their appreciation to your corporate policies and the ethical behavior. So very quickly, I'm going to go back to Umeshi. If you can, in less than 30 seconds, one thought you want everybody to take home with that. One thought.
When you're engaging a third party, don't let brand and the price point be your only decision-making areas. You have to ensure that, like I mentioned earlier, they have to tick with you, right? And you have to make sure that you can, transfer that data in a manner which they will not compromise and cause any disrepute to the organization. So I think it's third-party security in that sense, Sujit, is extremely important.
Sorry, Nishan, 30 seconds, your final thoughts.
This is a journey, what is going to happen, right? And people will be, humans is human. We will always make a mistake or with whatever we have. So we have to keep that in mind, and whatever we do, by design, we need to put things into play. So that's my thought.
All right. Thank you. Shiranti, closing
Yeah, so
thoughts?
today's topic is about cybersecurity and digital transformation. I'll take something from leadership. This is something I've coined for transformative leadership. Enjoy the freedom of being vulnerable. That is your stepping stone to transformation. So we do a lot of vulnerability testing and so much for cybersecurity. But if you begin to enjoy the freedom of being vulnerable, that is your stepping stone to transformation. Because then how are you going to enjoy? You're just so ready, right, with everything you need to do. So that's my thinking.
Yeah.
That applies to us as leaders as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the session has been very thought-provoking. There are diverse thoughts you all shared, right? I must thank you for that, right? So my thoughts, what I want to take home with me is when I think of transformation, it is more of a culture, right? Be it transformation in terms of life, technology, digital, whatever. It is fluid and it is evergreen, right? You're never transformed. You're always transforming. So it's a journey, like what Nishan said, right? So we need to always find ways to keep transforming so that we can always optimize our processes and very especially find ways to minimize the threat and the threat vectors. Thereby reducing the vulnerability, we can have a secure, prosperous businesses. So with that note, I just want to thank all of you and the participants who have joined us virtually for spending this time, valuable time of yours with us. I hope this session has been fruitful for you. I know there are a few questions which we could not answer. We'll probably try and respond to you on an email, those questions. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in season 2 in a couple of weeks from now. So stay tuned for further updates. Thank you and take care. Good night.
Thank you.